is May 7th, 2015. We are in Economy, Pennsylvania. I'm interviewing Louis Mercadante. He served in the Marine Corps during the Korean War as a private. Specifically, he served in Fox 27, or Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marine. This company is famous for holding a hill called Fox Hill during the Chosin Reservoir battle, and holding it for 5 days and 6 nights. Fox Hill is critical because it held the pass, the Toktong Pass, that the Marines of the 7th, 11th, and 7th, 1st, and 5th companies needed to get out. Around 15,000 Marines got through that pass, and it was all thanks to Fox Company, who held the hill. Around 240 men first stepped foot on Fox Hill whenever they first stepped off their trucks in the Toktong Pass. Only 85 men walked off the hill. Mr. Mercadante was one of those 85 men. Were you drafted or enlisted?
I enlisted in the reserves. The Marine Corps doesn't draft anybody. They're all enlisted personnel. So I don't know of anybody that ever got drafted into the Marine Corps. So anyone that served in the Marine Corps basically enlisted.
Okay. Where were you living at the time?
Ambridge.
Ambridge? Economy? Or
well, Harmony Township. Yeah.
Okay. Pennsylvania.
Right.
Why did you join the reserves?
Oh, it's just something to do. I was young, and, seemed like a good thing, so a lot of us from Ambridge joined. And it was probably 20 people from Ambridge that joined at the same time I did. And we'd go to the monthly meetings. That was a good time. It was never figured that we'd ever have to go in battle. Those things happen.
When did you join the reserves?
In 1948.
So you were in the reserves for 2 years before
Yes.
Before Chosin in Korea?
Yes.
Why did you pick the Marine Corps?
I just liked the Marine Corps. I always admired the Corps. It was my choice.
Do you recall your first days whenever you joined the reserves? Was there anything that you found challenging?
No, all we did, like I said, we'd go to monthly meetings. At first we went out to South Park, which was a good ways out in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. Then we transferred over to Neville Island, and we'd go to our meetings at Neville Island. And we'd go through some training every month. We'd have regular sessions, teach you how to take the rifles apart, and teach you basic things that the infantry people have to know.
Do you remember any of your instructors or leaders?
No. I can't remember any of their names.
Okay. Where exactly did you go in Korea?
Well, first when we left Pittsburgh, we went out to Camp Pendleton in California. We were there for 30 days. Then we went down to San Diego, boarded ship, and went over to Japan, to Kobe, Japan. Kobe, Japan, they gave us some winter gear, which consisted of parkas and shoe packs and socks, heavy socks, and gloves. Regular winter gear, but not set up for the winter that we were heading into, but what they had for winter gear at that time. So that's what they issued us, and we left there and went to Korea.
Do you remember arriving in Korea whenever you first saw it from the boat?
Well, we landed at Wonsan Harbor. It's the first I've seen it, which is in North Korea. I was never in South Korea. I landed in Wonsan Harbor. We went ashore, and none of us were assigned to companies at that point. We were a replacement draft, first and second replacement draft. And from there, we moved our way up to Hungnam, I think was the name of the area where we went, and that's where I got assigned to Fox Company. From there, I went north till we got caught up with Fox Company at Hag Road.
What was your job or assignment in that company?
Just an infantry, just strictly infantry.
Did you write to your family at all?
No, we didn't have much time to write. I sent a few letters, but not many. And I don't know if any of them ever got out of there. I really don't know.
So you didn't really have any free time while in Korea?
Not while I was there. I was there such a short period of time.
Did you keep a personal diary at all?
No.
No? Tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences on the road to Chosin.
Well, what was funny was we were down in Hag Road. It was Thanksgiving Day, and they brought us a hot meal. And they served us shrimp. Well, I had never eaten shrimp in my life. I always thought shrimp was fish bait. We ate shrimp and had a hot meal. And they said, well, let's go. We have to get on these trucks. We have to get you up there before dark. So they rushed us over. Of course, in the military, everything, you hurry up and wait constantly. So we got on the trucks, took us up. By the time we got to Fox Hill, it was starting to get dark. So they had to get the trucks back. So unloaded us right there, and our officers and decided how we were going to disperse on the hill. And I was in the 3rd Battalion, so I ended up there on the top of the hill.
Did you see any combat before Chosin? Well, you already answered that. You didn't see any combat before Chosin?
No,
Nothing at all?
We on the way up there, we had night patrols, and but we didn't engage any enemy forces.
There was no sign of any Chinese troops at all?
No. We've seen a lot of Koreans drifting back and forth, but you couldn't tell whether they were Koreans or Chinese. I don't know how you tell them apart. They're Orientals. They all look alike.
Was there anything special you did for good luck at all?
Not really.
No? When did you realize you were caught in a trap?
I really never knew we were in a trap. I knew we were in a bad situation. We were really overrun, but I never felt that I wasn't going to get out of there. I just felt that we were going to get out of it. So I never really was concerned about being trapped and isolated. I didn't find that out until later.
So your officers and other leaders didn't tell you, and
No.
they kept spirited up?
No, when you're in a combat area, there's very little of that stuff gets dispersed. They know what they're doing, and they take charge, and that's the way it works.
What about the Chinese? Were they good fighters?
Oh yeah, they fought at night, and they never quit coming. They just they would have one guy with a weapon, 6 or 7 guys behind him with ammunition on a stick.
On a stick?
On a stick. Had an ammunition box on a stick, carrying it over their shoulder. And as you mowed them down, they would just take over the rifle and keep coming. There was no end. They just kept coming.
Did you know that Captain Barber had been ordered back to Hagaruri after you had 22 wounded?
No, I didn't. He came up and talked to us every day. He came up to my position every day. He was wounded, walked with a cane, and always had other people with him, but he came by every day.
Were rifles all you had to fight with?
Rifles and Browning automatic rifles, which didn't work, and M1 rifles and carbines. And even the M1 rifles froze up. We had difficulty with them. It was so cold. It was horrible.
Well, how would they not work? Would they freeze up?
Freeze up. We had to take our foot, kick the breech open with our foot.
How did you reload your weapons in the cold then?
Very, very quickly. Your hands were cold, had no gloves. You couldn't wear gloves. Because we had, you know, if you ever seen an M1 clip, but you got to put the bullets in one on top of the other, lapping each other. So you have to jam them in there. So you have to take the gloves off. If you have gloves, you can't wear them. So we just, that's why our hands were all frozen. Reloading.
So you didn't have any like clips of rounds for the M1? You had to load each round?
They drop us ammunition in, so we just had to reload the clips.
Was there much hand-to-hand fighting?
Every day. That's all we did, hand-to-hand fighting.
Did most of the fighting take place at night, as you said?
Always at night. As soon as it got dark, they would shoot flares up in the air, blow their bugles, away they came.
Did daybreak bring any relief from the continuous onslaught?
As soon as it got daylight, they retreated. They went back over on their hill because that's when the planes came in. They got out of the way with the strafing and the rockets and the napalm.
What acts did you witness that you regard as outstandingly heroic?
Well, I think the whole situation there was heroic. Everybody had a part. Couldn't move. We were stuck on one piece of ground. Everybody had to hold their position. So I think everybody that was there really performed heroically. You know, I don't see anything less than that.
Did you know Private First Class Hector
Doing very well. Hector Caffaretta,
or the actions he took?
when he got chased out of his position, he came up and jumped in with me. In fact, he was with me the whole first night, and then he went back down to where he was originally to get his shoes because he had run up the hill without his shoes. He went down there, and while he was there, he was shot 2 or 3 different times. Got wounded pretty bad. And after that, I didn't see Hector. So I only was with him that one night in battle, but we were together when we were at Camp Pendleton. 30 days we were at Pendleton.
So he was a replacement like you?
Right. He went the same time I did. He was with the reserve outfit from, I think, Bayonne, New Jersey. And he ended up at Camp Pendleton, same as I did. And we ended up at Tent Camp 2, and that's where I met him. I know him very well.
What was his personality like? What was he like?
Well, he was just a young kid, very big, strapping guy, you know, very strong person. Nice guy, mild-mannered person.
Did you know Staff Sergeant Robert Kennemore or the actions he took?
No, I don't know his name at all.
Did you know Sergeant Daniel P. Matthews or the actions he took?
No.
What's your opinion on Captain Barber and his actions? How do you describe his personality?
Captain Barber was a very, very good officer. Very, very good Marine officer. Very talented. And if it wasn't for him, I don't think we would have gotten out of there. He was the whole reason we survived.
And you said that he was wounded, so he didn't give up. Like he had a very
No,
iron.
there was a lot of our guys were wounded, and they didn't stay down in the med tent. They came up, took their positions. Guys that were shot had shrapnel. They came up and stayed in their positions at night. The only ones that didn't come up were the guys that were really badly wounded that couldn't get around. But everybody else was there. And he was a good example because, you know, he was shot twice, but he limped around. He came around.
There were stories that he actually was carried by stretcher bearers
I
whenever he
never
couldn't
seen
walk
him
anymore.
carried by a stretcher. I was right there. He never was on a stretcher when he came by me, and he came by me every day.
He always had his cane then.
In fact, I seen him when I got flown out of Korea down into Gangnam. I seen him there, and he wasn't in a stretcher there either. So I don't know where that got started, but I'm not aware that ever took place. He was always able to come around.
You mentioned about how a lot of the wounded still fought on. Amongst your platoon, how many guys were in there whenever you walked up to the hill?
Well, the squadron I was in had probably 8 or 9 guys, and after the first night, there was only 2 of us left there, plus the 2 Gonzalez brothers that were down a little bit away from us. But physically, manpower, after the first 2 nights, I was really the only guy up there with the lieutenant.
What happened during the first night? Why did so many men get wounded or
Oh,
killed?
well, we were just overrun. It was just a surprise. A lot of guys never made it through the first night. Probably lost half of our men the first night.
Who was the lieutenant who was with you?
Robert McCarthy lives in Nashville, North Carolina right now.
What was he like?
He was a good guy. He was a good lieutenant. He was a young lieutenant. He did a good job.
And did you know the Gonzalez brothers at all?
Well, just because we were there. I didn't know him before that.
So, but you weren't in the same surrounding areas. You said they were farther forward in front
Well,
of
they
you?
were probably 20 yards from where I was.
In front of you.
I would say to my left, below, back toward the main compound. We're going back down the hill from where I was.
Did you know the tactical value of the Tonkin Pass?
I didn't back then, no, but since then I realized that it was very important that we stay there and maintain that position.
You talked about how you had strafing runs on the Chinese. How was your air support?
The air support, once it got daylight, was tremendous. They were there every day. In fact, they would fly down in the gullies. We could look right at the pilot. They would wave at us as they were going down through there. John Glenn was one of the pilots, I think, in that area.
And
It was Navy Corsairs.
did you have any other support other than air support that was helping you?
The 105 howitzers that fired, come over our head. We called them in, and we didn't even know that they could hear us because we couldn't hear them, but they heard us. They were getting our messages, but we couldn't get their messages. But I guess Captain Barber and whoever was in charge of that called them in, and they did a good job.
Was it possible for you to be supplied from there?
They dropped us ammunition every day. Flying boxcars come over. They made a circle with parachutes and made an airdrop, and they would fly over and drop the stuff there.
Was there any food in there, or did you have any type of supplies
I
other
think we
than
got some
ammunition?
sea rations one time, but I hardly ate anything in 5 days.
So it was only ammunition, that was it.
Right.
Well, do you know what the lowest temperature it was there?
I understand it was minus 40. That was before anybody ever thought about wind chill factors. So how cold it really was, it had to be 50 degrees or better, below zero.
How are you able to fight under these freezing conditions?
You just did it. You had to survive. That's why when you look at the tradition of the Marine Corps, they're disciplined people. And our officers and NCOs, they were disciplined. Now, they were all regular Marine Corps guys that fought in the Second World War. A lot of them had been in the Second World War. So they were veterans, and they knew how to hold everybody together.
How did you sleep? Did you sleep at all?
No, I didn't sleep.
No? Pardon a more personal question, but how do you relieve yourself during the terrible weather?
Well, the military positions always have what they call latrines. Get a certain area that they use. That's where you went.
You did that during the daytime, not at night, of course.
Whenever the urge hit you, you had to go. You couldn't go by appointment. It just, whenever it happened, it happened.
How did the medical personnel operate during the battle? Surely the freezing temperatures affected them.
It was very difficult. The morphine froze. They couldn't administer morphine. They couldn't fly out anybody that had wounds in the lungs or any breathing problems. It was very difficult. A lot of guys died from just from shock because they couldn't get them out of there. And all we had was corpsmen. Didn't have any doctors there, just corpsmen. Navy trained corpsmen.
So you said how they couldn't airlift anybody who had a lung wound at all. Why was that?
Because we were too high up in altitude, and they couldn't fly them out. They couldn't be able to breathe. And all we had was one-man helicopters with litter carriers on each side. And they'd put you in a litter carrier. You know, it's 40, 50 below zero. Stick you on that litter carrier and fly out. And you're getting shot at the whole time you're gone. So it wasn't a good situation. But they couldn't take anybody out that had real severe wounds.
Were you wounded while in Chosin?
No, I just had severe frostbite and concussion from a concussion grenade. They had little grenades that they would throw at us. And you'd take your entrenching tool and hit them like a baseball bat and knock them away. And one of them came in underneath. I ducked down to get away from it. When it exploded, it just rolled me over, and I had a headache for a couple of days.
How would you describe the leadership of Captain Barber
Leadership?
and other officers?
Excellent. Very good. They were very, very good Marines. Well trained, well disciplined.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Well, I would say probably 80% casualties between the dead and the wounded. I would imagine there was very, very few men that came off of the hill that didn't have some problem. Either frostbite, shrapnel, gunshot wounds. You'd be very lucky if you didn't have something.
How did you survive?
Yeah, I was 19. When you're 19, you have a lot of strength that you don't have when you're older. That's why they want young people. You have to be young to survive in that environment.
Did you ever feel it'd be impossible to fight on?
Well, by the time I got to Hagaro off the hill, I knew I couldn't go any further because I couldn't use my hands. And my feet were frozen. So there's no way. I suppose if I had to, I would have. It would have been very difficult.
Do you feel that you could have held on to your position for a longer period of time?
I doubt it. I don't think we could have because we were running out of men. We were getting worn out physically and mentally. And they overrun you every night, so I don't know how long you can survive that.
When were you relieved, or when were you? When did someone? What was it? What day was it? Whenever someone broke through and was able to get to you?
It was the fifth day. That's when that group of Marines. I don't know what. I don't know who they were now. I can't. They worked their way through the mountains and came over to us.
How did you find out that you had people who were relieving you, who were getting you out of there?
Well, I guess our officers knew they were working their way toward us. We didn't know if they would ever get there. But I seen them coming. They came right past my position. They come down that rocky ridge and right down where I was positioned. They came right by me. So I seen them coming. And Lieutenant MacArthur seen them coming.
How did you feel whenever you saw Marines coming down towards you?
Well, it just felt like, well, we won. Gonna make it now. So just was a real good feeling to see other guys.
Whenever they did get to you, what happened afterwards? How did you get out?
Well, we immediately left the hill. By that time, the other troops were coming down the road, tanks and the trucks. And we got down there, and I got on a truck to ride into Haggeroo. When I got to Haggeroo, I went to the field hospital, and they put me on a plane and shipped me out of there.
One of the things people talk about in Chosin is how the Marines tried to get everyone out, including the dead. How did you transport your dead from Fox Hill?
Carried them down and put them on the trucks before anybody else got on them. We didn't leave a body on the hill.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
No.
Do you regard Chosin as unique in Marine history?
Pardon me?
Do you regard Chosin as unique in Marine history?
I think it is. I think it's on the same par as Iwo Jima, from what I understand. It's a battle that I think they even use the defense that we had on Fox Hill in their training. Sometime later, after I got out, we had our first reunion at Quantico Marine Base, and we went down, went through the whole base. Well, the guy that was there, a guy by the name of Colonel Fox. It's funny, his name was Fox. He was training the officers candidates for, he was training them, and they were using the defense that we had on Fox Hill in their training program. He told us that.
It's been said there's never been a Marine company that stood up for 5 days against an enemy regiment. Not only that, but you were 6 or 7 miles from the nearest Marine unit. Did you ever feel forgotten?
I never did. Of course, I didn't really know what was going on, so I was fortunate. I didn't know how critical the situation was, but I never had any feeling that I wasn't going to get out of there.
After you came back and learned more about Chosin, do you personally blame anyone for the entrapment of the Marines?
Well, it was just poor intelligence, I think, that got us involved in that. I think MacArthur probably misjudged what was going on. The whole thing was just a fiasco. We were lucky to get out of it.
What was your most vivid memory of the Chosin campaign?
Fierce weather and the amount of Chinese troops, just no end. It just kept coming, just no end. Just can't imagine. It's like a crowd just kept coming.
Whenever you got to Japan after being on the truck and getting out and being airlifted to Japan, what happened whenever you reached there? Where were you sent?
That was funny. We got into the Naval Hospital, and of course, we still had all our foul weather gear and everything on us. Had hand grenades in our pockets and everything. nurses would say, we'll empty out pockets and we throw these hand grenades out on the table. They wanted to run out of the room. Kind of frightened them. We looked like a bunch of coal miners coming out of there. All filthy dirty.
What exactly did you have frostbite?
I had frostbite, and they didn't do anything for frostbite but give us shots of penicillin. I was in a hospital, in a barracks hospital. It wasn't a hospital, it was a barracks hospital. There was hundreds of Marines, all with the same problem. And they would come through every morning and give us a shot of penicillin. That's all they did for me. So I was there from probably the second week of December until April 1st.
Where exactly did you have frostbite?
Hands and feet.
Was it extremely bad
Well,
for you?
For a while, it was very difficult to walk and to use your hands.
Was there anyone from your company that was with you in the barracks, in the hospital?
Yes, a fellow by the name of James Hostetler. He's from Glen Willard. And we get together periodically. He was with me on the hill also. In fact, one night I asked him to come up and stay with me because I didn't want to stay there by myself. At the end of that slit trench by myself for a couple of nights. I didn't like that, being alone out there. He came up and stayed there with me.
So by the end of the days, you were the only one up there?
It was me and Lieutenant McCarthy.
And you asked
Hostetler to come up. And of course the two Gonzalez brothers were like 20 yards away. And I couldn't see them where they were. But we were the furthest point out on the top of the hill. There was no one beyond us. We were the last point. I was the last guy there. Furthest point out.
do you recall the day that you ended your service in Japan or Korea?
Well, in Korea,
On April 1st?
Just got flown out of there, to the hospital in Japan. And I came home and I got stationed down in Yorktown, Virginia.
Now you brought with you a picture or a newspaper clipping that was in the Pittsburgh Press, correct?
Yeah, Pittsburgh Press. These were the men that flew back, came over from Japan into San Francisco, and then we were given orders to go wherever we were going to be stationed. But there was that many there, 9 or 10 of us, that came back to Pittsburgh. We all came on the same flight.
And all of you were in Chosin?
Yes.
Did you fly back with your one buddy?
No.
No?
No, I didn't see him until many, many years later. I ran into him down at Myrtle Beach, on the beach.
Which one is you in the photo?
I am right here.
Let's see you. So you were still enlisted in the Marine Corps whenever you got back to Pittsburgh?
Oh yes, I was in the Marines for another year and a half.
Do you think that you would be called back up to go back to Korea?
No, no. Once you've had frostbite, you can't really go into combat anymore.
After Korea, did you go back to school or work?
Well, after Korea, when I got out of the Marines, 1952, I came home. I went back to the job that I had but I quit to go to college, but they gave me my job back driving a milk truck, delivering milk, retail delivery of milk. I did that for about 10 months, and I decided that I couldn't do this. I couldn't work out in the elements like I thought I could. So I decided to go to school. And I went to school, business administration, at a small business training college in Pittsburgh, Duffsarn City Business College. 2 years straight through there, got a job in public accounting. 4 years later, I passed the CPA exam, started my own business, and had that for 55 years. That's pretty much what I've done.
Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
Yes.
Whenever you got back, did you have trouble getting used to being around other people and not worrying about combat?
No, I had no trouble with adjustments. Fortunately, I didn't have any trouble.
So you talked about some close friendships you made in the Marine Corps, such as Caffaretta and what was his name?
Hostetler, James Hostetler.
Hofstetter.
And there was other men that weren't with me right on Fox Hill, but were over in Korea, that were from the Pittsburgh area, and we used to get together periodically. But they're all deceased now. Hostetler's the only one left.
So you said how you saw Hofstetter on Myrtle Beach a couple of years later, but that's how you saw him. And that means that you saw your other friend,
Well, once
Caffaretta.
the only time I seen Caffaretta was at a reunion. I think he lives in Florida now. I only seen Hector once. I only went to one reunion.
Did you keep in contact with the Gonzalez brothers or the lieutenant?
Only by Christmas cards. Lieutenant McCarthy, I talked to him on the phone several times. In fact, I'm trying to get some time to go down and visit with him because he's in his 90s now. I was 19, he was probably 25 or 26 when we were there, so he's in his 90s. I'm 84, so he's well into his 90s.
So you said how you started your own business. What was your business for? What was your career?
Certified public accounting.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Once I got out of the Marine Corps, I kind of forgot about all that stuff.
How do you think the Marine experience at Chosin affected the Marine Corps?
How did Chosin affect it?
Yeah.
Well, I think they learned a lesson there. I think they realized that it was an area that we really weren't geared to be in. We were out of our element, but the training that they had got them through it.
Was there ever any time that you were approached about your experience in Fox on
No.
Fox Hill?
The only thing I can tell you, we went down to the Marine Corps building, the new museum that they have at Quantico, and when they found out that Jim and I went together, and they found out that we were with Fox Company, you'd have thought we were generals, because we had actually had high military people come and look us up to talk to us. So we felt pretty good about that. So it has a big impact on the Marine Corps in general.
How do you feel Chosin affected the relationship between China and the U.S.?
Well, I think China became communist, and the effect is, you can see it for years. It was terrible. And, it's still bad because they back North Korea. We have trouble with North Korea today. So anything we do against North Korea, if they would attack South Korea and we would go back in to fight them, we'd be fighting the Chinese one more time. So how does it affect us? I think it destroyed our relationship. China used to be one of our best friends. But we had Marines that were with me in Chosin that trained the Chinese after the Second World War.
So,
And they would, at night, these Chinese would go over loudspeakers and call our officers out by name. They knew them, personally knew them. So, at one time China was a close ally.
so the Marines that were fighting the Chinese had actually been the ones to actually train and teach?
A lot of them were trained, some of those people. It was strange, you hear it come over a loudspeaker and they call your name out. And an officer calls his name out. It was funny.
You mentioned how you attended a reunion. Did you attend any more reunions? Or?
No, I only went to the one. Because Jim Hostetter didn't want to go to any other one because you go there, all they do is relive the war, and he didn't really want to do that. So I didn't want to go by myself, and they're all over the country. And sometimes the dates that they have conflict with other things that you're doing, so you just don't go. But I think I'm going to go to another one.
Okay. How do you think your service and experiences affected your life?
Well, I think they changed my whole attitude toward life. When you get in a situation like we were in, and you're able to come out of it, I think you wake up. I was just a 19-year-old that didn't know much about anything. I think it wakes you up. Teaches you a lot about life. Every day is precious. I've seen a lot of guys didn't live very long.
Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in the interview?
No, I think we covered everything pretty well.
Thank you for sharing your experiences, Mr. Mercadante. How was winter gear affected by the Chosin campaign?
I think it completely changed the concept of how you had to be dressed for severe weather, because the amount of frostbite was tremendous, and we really weren't geared for that type of weather. So they designed a Korean boot afterwards, which is a real heavy insulated boot. Very difficult to walk with, but it would have been good to have. We wouldn't have had the frostbite if we'd had those boots. So it really affected the gear, and I think they've designed all kind of, you have Gore-Tex, different types of uniform, military gear now that it's lighter weight. Parkas are real heavy, bulky, long. They come down past your knees, so hard to walk around with that stuff. You're not very mobile when you got that stuff, plus trying to carry all the junk you have to carry in combat. So I think they've streamlined the gear, and it's probably a lot more effective than that heavy, bulky stuff that we had. So I think it was very instrumental in changing how they dressed for those conditions. And that was because of the Korean War that came about. The Chinese came down the road and up toward this way, because the other hill was steep and there was a big gully, and then they had to come up a steep hill to get to us. So the bulk of the activity was right here. This is where the big machine guns were.
Yeah.
And they never quit. They just chattered all night and mowed the heck of them down all along here, because they came down the road and then came up on the hill, and they'd come up the valley, and some of these come over from this hill over to here. But the bulk of the activity was down here.
So
You saw some of the other guys who were just overflow that came from
Well,
just
that was
around
the
you.
first night. There was a ton of them come up past us.
Can you point out where you were on the map?
I would say, from looking at this, I would be somewhere in this area here. There was a rocky ridge that ran out here, and we were on that ridge, and it looked down in this valley, and then they were over on this knoll over here. And they would come down every night, come down through and come up, but the bulk of them came down this way and tried to penetrate here from the bottom of the hill up.
So you're talking about there was a group of rocks near where you were? Did you take
they
cover
were
behind them?
back by, like, if I was as far back as our troops were on the hill right now, then the rocks were behind me, further out, on out
Got it.
this ridge. The ridge ran all the way out, and then it flattened out. Where this gully came up, it flattened out. Those rocks were out there.
So you didn't change positions at all. You held that position the entire time?
Stayed there and never moved. I was there the whole 5 days.
Would you like to go to a different map?
Well, you can put the other map up and we'll see if we can.
So you were
I was in the 3rd
right there.
platoon. I think Hector might have been in the 2nd platoon. And he came up over this way, came up to where our position was.
Did you provide any fire on the troops who were attacking the 2nd platoon from the valley?
No, because I couldn't even see them. From where I was, all I could see was what was in front of us out here. I couldn't see anything down there. But the Chinese, every night, came through all the way through the whole spot. They walked right through us every night.
They walked right
They walked
next
right
to
by
us.
us. A lot of them just, you couldn't shoot every one of them. But you had to be careful because, we were so spread out. If they knew how sparse we were up there, they would have overrun us completely. But they didn't know. I mean, we were spread out. One guy here, one guy there. And, the orders were, after dark, if you move, you're dead. So you didn't move after dark. Just stayed right there.
So it was shoot on sight. It wasn't.
So if they
You
were close
move.
by, shoot.
And you said they walked right on by you. Did they just keep on going, or
Yeah,
did they ignore you?
They're looking for us. They walked right by you.
Even though you were firing right next to them?
Well, sometimes you didn't fire. You just sat there, being quiet. But it was just a strange situation. We had one night, I think it was the 2nd night, there was a bugler right out, just out in front of us here, blowing his brains out. That's how they gave their commands. That's how they would tell them to advance or retreat. The bugler was the guy that set the pace. Well, we killed the bugler. Someone shot the bugler. But he was close. He was probably between me and Gonzalez brothers. He was somewhere in that area.
So he was in between you.
Yeah, blowing that bugle. But they would shoot these flares up and would light the sky up. And they would come up.
And you said how you had air support. Where exactly would they shoot at? Where would they strafe?
Well, they would strafe this saddle, this rocky knoll, this whole area here. They'd strafe this whole area. And they dropped the napalm on that rocky knoll up there. And shoot the rockets. That was a real, like a rock at Gibraltar. You could see big rocks up there. They were probably dug in those hills up there. But they cooked them up there, and I'll tell you what, they were still there.
Even though they were basically having everything thrown at them?
They were hit so much with rockets and napalm and strafed. You wonder how anybody could survive. But they did. There was still more there than we could handle. So I don't know how they survived. because it shoot that white phosphorus 105s up there and explode in midair and come down. White phosphorus gets on you, it burns all right through you. You can't stop it. So I don't know how they survived, but they did. But you know, every one of their troops had U.S. kids, and almost every one of them had a Thompson submachine gun.
So they were where they had American
Yeah,
gear.
they got them from the 6th Marines in Tsingtao. That's where they got all that gear.
So the guys who trained them were also fighting stuff that was given to the Chinese as gifts.
Right, that's right. Yeah, they left that stuff in China when they left Tsingtao. But that's you know, the history of war. So they leave all that gear there. Well, there was Thompson submachine guns everywhere. I mean, you could have picked up 50 of them on our hill. They were laying everywhere.
So then, since reloading was such a struggle, did you ever just reach out and grab one of the machine guns and use it, or
No. All I ever did was grab a carbine. But most of the time I just used the M1. I was a Browning automatic rifleman, but it only worked one night.
the first night,
And it froze up.
and it wouldn't work no matter
None
how
of them
much?
would work. No. I probably had the last one on the hill that was working. They quit. They all froze up. It wouldn't work.
So we have this map here of all of Chosin. Could you describe how it was like heading up to Hagaru and
Well,
the route you took
we went right up the road, right into Hagaru.
in
Right.
trucks?
Coterie, trucks and rail. We went a long way on rail.
On trains?
Yeah, flatbed cars.
So there was a.
But it
there
just seemed
was
like
a-
the war was over. You know, the Chinese hadn't come into the war. The Koreans were beat. They were whipped. And if the Chinese wouldn't have come in, the war would have been over. I'd have never seen an ounce of combat.
So wherever you reached Hagaru, you.
The Korean War wasn't really a Chinese war. It wasn't a Korean War. But we right up the road into Hagaru. They were building that airstrip in Hagaru. And then we left there and went up Fox Hill.
And they just dropped you there without telling you
That's it.
anything.
Just dropped us off there and said, "We'll see you." Well, they went back with the trucks and we climbed the hill. And we didn't think anything. We just figured, you know, just another hill. We're going to go up there and sit there tonight. But for some reason, I didn't get in my sleeping bag. A lot of guys got in their bags.
And you stayed
A
away
lot
from
of them didn't get out of their sleeping bags. We carried some down off the hill, still in their bags.
So when did they first attack? At night? They attacked
night,
At
yeah.
night?
Yeah.
That one night?
Yeah.
So you were asleep during that time, or were you awake whenever they
I wasn't
first?
sleeping. Some of the guys were sleeping, but I wasn't. I couldn't sleep. It was too cold. No place to sleep. I wasn't going to crawl in that sleeping bag. I didn't know what was going on. I figured, you know, I'm going to stay awake. Good thing I did.
So describe what it was like whenever like they attacked the
Well,
first night.
first I was sitting there on my position, and I seen 3 Chinese come up over the hill. And I said to the lieutenant, "Look out there." He said, "Kill them." And from that point on, we just was constant battle.
So they were wearing gear.
White quilted on stuff. All had U.S. kid shoes on.
Did you know they were Chinese troops at the time?
No.
So you thought that you were constantly being attacked
I
by
didn't
North
know who they
Koreans?
were. All I know is that, you know, we had to get rid of them. And once the action started, it didn't matter who they were.
Okay.
It's a nightmare. You know, it just, you say, how do you know what to do? You just react. do whatever it takes, you do it.
What did you do during the daytime whenever you weren't being attacked?
You couldn't do anything, you'd just sit, because every time if you try to walk around, snipers would shoot you.
So there was constantly being fire on
Yeah.
you, even during the day?
Oh yeah.
So there's no...
I was sitting in the trench with my feet propped on one side, and this other Marine was sitting looking toward me, and McCarthy was to our left. And all of a sudden the guy put his head down, and I went and I pushed on him. I said, "Hey," he had a bullet hole right there, hit him right in the neck. From me, we were closer than you and me, and that was during the day.
So you had to just...
So yeah, just never knew. I mean, you couldn't walk around.
So how did they get in the ammunition to you then?
Well, they dropped it on the back side, and we run down in there and get it. We were fired on the whole time we were going down to get the ammo. Yeah. Well, it actually probably be, let's see.
So you're right there.
I would say the ammo was dropped here, back behind us.
Do you want to go back to the other map? Is this better, maybe, to explain it, or?
Well, they would drop the ammo somewhere out in here, somewhere.
So they dropped down the first platoon right where they were?
Well, yeah, I guess. I don't really understand where they were, because it doesn't look to me like this is the way it was set up. I would think that these guys were more down this way.
So you didn't have any attack from this side?
No.
No?
No. These guys came up through us, and then they bailed back out. But nobody came this way. They all came from the north toward us. If they'd have come up from this way, they'd have wiped us out. That's what they didn't know.
So they must have assumed that there were like tons and hundreds of Marines
They thought there was
stuck in
more
there.
of us there than what there was. Up on the trucks. They dropped us off right here on the bend in the road. We assembled there, and of course then we went by platoon. They called out, said where you were going. I said 3rd platoon, top the hill. Off we went. I didn't see the other guys after that. 2nd platoon, 1st platoon. That's the way it went.
So you didn't know if you were the only guys left or not?
No. Well, I knew we would carry wounded and dead down during the day. We would go, anybody that was laying there, we'd go get them. We would get them out of that area and take them down to the main area down here.
What did the main area look
Just
like?
a
What
tent.
was it? One
Just a
tent?
tent.
How-
Just a main tent that they had set up.
How big was it?
Oh, I don't even remember. I couldn't tell you. I'd have to guess. I didn't pay much attention to it. We just took the wounded down there and dropped them, and the medics would take over.
So the medics didn't ever head up to your positions at all? They just stayed down there and treated the wounded?
That's the battle. If you needed them, you called for a medic, they would come. Call for a corpsman, he would be there.
Could you describe what corpsman was?
Corpsman
What
is
is?
just a medic, just like a paramedic out here. That's what they are. They're first responders. They do the best they can. Patch you up, get you to the hospital.
So you said how they ran out of morphine. Did they run out of bandages?
Morphine wouldn't work. Morphine was froze. They couldn't administer it. It was froze solid.
So did
They
they?
couldn't give you anything for pain.
What about did they ever run out of bandages? So they need medical supplies other than morphine?
I don't know. That was not my department. I was nowhere near that. But I don't think they could have got it to us. Knowing that we were trapped, I didn't know we were in that dire situation. But they could not get the stuff to us, only by airdrops. It's the only way they could get to us. They couldn't come up the roads because the Chinese were everywhere. They were 50 miles south of us. They were clear down. Whoa. let's see. Put the other map on. Chinese were clear down here. On the way out, they encountered a lot of battle all the way down here. They had the air flyboys came by all day long, strafing and while they were walking out. That was the only way to get out, walk that road. There's no other way out.
So whenever someone was wounded, there's in other interviews people talking about because of how cold it was, they didn't need a bandage at all. They didn't need to stop the bleeding.
Well,
It just
yeah, they put bandages on them, but they couldn't give them anything for pain. They couldn't give them any morphine.
but like
And when you're out in the field like that, you don't have supplies like you have in a hospital. Or in the paramedics, we call it paramedics, they have a whole van full of stuff. There was no van. You had a guy with a pack. That was it.
Well, there was a thing about how apparently at that temperature, it said that whenever guys were shot, the blood immediately froze up.
Well, I don't know about that. There was a lot of blood.
So you didn't see that at all?
No, I didn't. No, we hauled the guys down there and left them and immediately went back up to our position.
So
There's a lot of stuff you don't see. It goes on.
well, you said how there was wounded that also kept on fighting. Did you see the Gonzalez brothers or the lieutenant
Oh, yeah,
get
I
injured
see.
and
A
just
lot
come
of our
back up?
guys that were hit. Jim Hostetler had shrapnel all through him. It's still coming out of him today.
What exactly happened?
Well, you know, stuff explodes near you and you get shrapnel in you, pieces of metal. Doesn't disable you, but it's there.
So, well, from what I understand, you said they only had machine guns. They didn't have any mortars or anything, or did they?
We had small mortars. Yeah.
So he got wounded by them from a grenade then, or?
Well, they had mortars. They would shoot mortars at us. They had all kinds of stuff and grenades, you know, different kinds of grenades. I don't know how he got the shrapnel, but he had shrapnel in him. Had to be from a grenade. It's about the only way you're going to get shrapnel, unless, you know, they didn't have any artillery. We had the artillery. They didn't have any artillery.
So all through the time that you were there, it was just
There was
constantly.
A lot of guys that were shot that had bullet wounds that were limping around and staying in their foxholes. They had to, because, you know, we had so many guys dead. You didn't have enough people. Couldn't leave a hole in the perimeter. You had to plug the hole. So if you could walk, you were there.
So constantly there was always just fire and mortar shells and
Every
grenades.
day. Yeah. During the day there wasn't much. It was at night. Everything was at night. During the day you'd have sniper fire, but you wouldn't have anything else during the day. They never fought during the day.
So whenever they did whenever they got on the loudspeaker and called out the officers,
night.
that was at night?
Yeah.
In the middle of fighting?
Just before they attacked us, it was at night, asking us to surrender so we could be home for Christmas. But that's the history of that. That was a real crazy place to be. Regular. But there's your roster right there, Fox Company. And I'm saying this roster ought to be down there in Quantico. And I'm trying to get it put in there. McCarthy's trying to get him to put it in there.
They list every single guy
That ought to be in there. That's part of the history. So all of our names ought to be there.
Thank you.
Okay, good enough.